All right. Well, thank you. And welcome to my talk, Levers of Human Deception, the science and methodology behind social engineering. Now, I love this talk because it's not like a super technical talk from the computer geek side of things here, right? But what it really does is it helps us understand why we struggle so hard against what seems to be so simple. Things like email phishing, things like vishing, which is the voice version where you get the phone call saying, hey, this is the IRS, we've suspended your social security number. Or they end up doing the phone call that says your car's extended warranty is about to expire. Now, we kind of laugh at those. We think they're kind of silly. We go, ha ha, whatever. But there's a reason they call so often. And that reason is, in some cases, it really does work. And so that's something we have to be careful about. Now, one of the things I find is that in a lot of cases, we underestimate the bad actors out there, the people that are doing these bad things. We kind of think, oh, you know what, they don't really know what they're doing. It's really dumb. We associate like a phishing email with something like the Nigerian prince scam, okay? But I got news for you. It's much, much deeper than that. And these new groups, these groups that are doing this stuff, are extremely good at what they're doing. We're losing a lot of money every year to these kinds of attacks that come from the social engineering side of things. The FBI said in 1 year we lost $1.8 billion. That's a lot of money that's being lost to this. So we have to take it seriously. And in order to defend ourselves, I think it's really important to understand why these work and how people fall for them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, a little bit of background. My name is Eric Krohn. I am a security awareness advocate here at KnowBe4. What is that? Well, it's a real title, and basically what it means is I get to take my experience and I get to talk to people about what I've learned, what I've seen, what works, what doesn't in security. And I'll tell you, I've been in IT and security since the mid 1990s is when I got into it. And throughout my career, I've worked in healthcare. I actually used to fix immunohistochemistry and in situ hybridization equipment. So I spent a lot of fun time in pathology labs and such. But I've worked in manufacturing. I've worked in a lot of different areas out there. I also worked for the Army for about 10 years as a contractor, where I ended up the security manager for the 2nd Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere. So I've seen a lot of very interesting things throughout my career and in these different areas. But one thing that's been common to so many of these is that attacks are often on humans. Now, we read about these breaches, we read about this kind of stuff in the news, and ultimately they use some really cool tools. Once they're in, it's really high tech, but the way that it almost always starts is super low tech. It's phishing emails most of the time. And I got to tell you, I've learned that throughout my career, and now I'm very, very passionate about it. And I really want to help people understand so they don't get scammed, both personally and in their workplaces. Because unfortunately, they're out there. The scams are out there all over the place. So I want you to be able to recognize them. So that's my background. That's where I come from and why I'm doing this. I work for an organization called KnowBe4. So KnowBe4, we do a security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. Our focus, our almost entire focus, is on trying to help people be better prepared to defend against these kinds of attacks. And so it's something that we see a lot of different and new trends in and stuff because we're so very into it. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to look at why these work. Like I said, this is kind of the driving force behind this. I said, you know what? What makes people fall for these? So that's what we're going to talk about. First thing I'm going to mention is this gentleman, Sun Tzu. He wrote a little book called Art of War a few years ago. You may have heard of it. But one of his sayings in there, one of his quotes was, all warfare is based on deception. So that may seem a little bit strong. Warfare is a very strong word, but here's the deal. What's going on in cybercrime these days is more than just an annoyance. We do have actual cyber warfare going on. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, any of these kinds of conflicts like that, they generally have a cyber part to them. And as a matter of fact, before Russia went into Ukraine, there was a volley of what's called disk wiping malware that hit Ukraine. The idea was to take them offline as much as they could in cyber capabilities while they continued with the other kinetic or physical attack. So this is something that's part of the world these days. Not only that, when we sanction countries, for example, North Korea and Iran, they oftentimes take to the cyberspaces to try to raise money, to steal our intellectual property and make it their, 10 times cheaper. This kind of stuff all happens as part of this giant economic and global warfare that's going on all the time. So it is serious. And I say this because I want you to know it is serious. And the example I always use, it's not the kids in their mom's basement drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza. It's just not. These are organized groups doing this. So we got to take it very, very seriously. Now, the other thing we have to understand is that, these social engineering attacks go for the low-hanging fruit, and that is the humans. It's just what they're after. And so we're going to talk about why here in a minute. This is our agenda, the perception versus reality dilemma. Understanding the OODA loop, how social engineers scam artists, and how we can defend ourselves. So let's roll into that here. Let's start with the perception versus reality dilemma. And we're going to start it off with a little bit of fun here, okay? I'm going to do a magic trick. I'm even going to tell you I'm going to do a magic trick. So get ready for it. Here you go. Pay attention to the screen. I'm going to make a card disappear. So I want you to pick a card, any card. I don't care which card it is. Make sure you know which card it is. And here we go. Your card is going to disappear. Well, I'm betting it's gone now, right? And if you're sitting there going, how did somebody in PowerPoint make my card disappear? Well, it kind of works like this. We started with this, and we ended with this group of cards. And what do you notice now? They're both completely different sets of cards. Why didn't you notice that at first? Well, because I was telling you to pick a card, any card. That's you picking a card that we're going to take away. So that's a pretty good way to get you to focus just on that card. Now, when we replace the cards with ones with a similar pattern and types of cards, you don't notice the difference until you see them side by side. And if that second group of cards had been 2 through 10, you would have noticed almost immediately. So rushing you through the process, getting you to focus on the one thing, that's kind of a focus redirection technique. I get you looking at that. You don't look around, okay? Now, what's important to understand on this is not only do you see that we can be tricked and not even realize it, but here's the important part. Now that you've seen this, if I tried to do this 6 months from now, or someone else even tries to do something, either this or something very, very similar, you're going to remember, you know what, that was a trick. You may not even remember exactly how it was done, but you will remember that it was a trick and it was a pretty simple one. You're going to recognize it for what it is. And that's what we want you doing when it comes to these phishing scams, these attacks, these social engineering attacks. You don't have to remember exactly how all the mechanics work, but you want to be able to recognize that, hey, wait a minute, I've seen this before, or I'm familiar with this. I see how this is going to work. That alone will save you a lot of trouble. Now, when it comes down to the deception piece, we got to understand that the root of deception comes back to our brain and our brain's job, which is to filter, interpret, and present reality. So the things that we smell, the things that we taste, the things that we touch and feel, all of those senses, we always think they're an absolute. But I'm here to tell you that that's not always the case. Basically, when we talk about deception and we talk about the filters that are involved, our brains are incredible things, but but they do apply filters. Okay, so for example, if you wear glasses, how often do you see the glasses when you're looking around? I mean, unless you think about it, you don't see the rim of your glasses in your vision. Your brain just filters it out. It's the same thing with our noses. We can look around with our eyes, look left, look right with our eyes, and we don't even notice our nose until we think about it. And then we can see our nose. Why? Because our brain is amazing and filters it out. There's a show out there. It's called Brain Games. I think it's on Hulu now. It's a fantastic show that goes into how this works and some of the amazing things that we don't even realize that our brains do. And if you're interested at all in this kind of psychology stuff, it's an amazing show, and it will really open your eyes to what I'm talking about here with filters. Now, these filters are built throughout our lives because if we do X, then Y has happened, 20 times in a row. So that's our expectation. Our body, our mind actually just goes to, if I do this, this is what happens. Okay. And so it expects that to come out of there. And if something is a little bit odd, sometimes we don't even notice it because our brain has already decided what has actually happened. It's a pretty amazing thing, but that's our brains. Now, to give you another couple of ideas or some little fun examples of filters with our brains, I'm going to take a step back right now to, this must have been late 1990s or so, maybe even earlier, something called an autostereogram. You may have seen these posters, okay? And the way these work is you kind of cross your eyes a little bit, and if you look at it just right and for long enough, eventually an image, a 3D image, will pop out of all this noise. Now, in this one, allegedly, there's a shark in there. I'll be honest, never been very good at these, okay? I've spotted a couple in my life, but this is not one of them. Now, what is interesting about this is once you've seen that image in there, when you go back and look at it again, it may take you a couple of seconds, but it is so much faster to see it the second time. Why? Because your brain filters out the noise behind it. Basically, it knows what to expect, and so it just filters that stuff out, making it much easier for you to see. These are an optical illusion, but it also works with your brain as well. So again, that's a pretty interesting thing. And who can forget this? The dresses. Two people sitting at the same desk, same monitor, and the same lighting conditions right next to each other could see two very different colors in this. Now, some of that is physical, but some of it is also in your mind, because now that you've seen this picture with both dresses side by side, even if you go back to the original picture and you've seen the white and gold, if you originally saw blue and black, odds are you're going to see that again. Your brain is still going to filter out the white and gold, even though it kind of exists in that picture. You have to fight really hard to see past it. There was also the audio files that went out. It was Yanni or Laurel, and people heard very clearly one or the other and thought everyone else was crazy that they didn't hear the one they didn't hear, okay? This was also a similar thing. If you listened to them separated and there was emphasis made, you could hear each one of them. You could hear Yanni. You could hear Laurel. But if you go back to the original file after that, you're still going to hear the first thing you heard, because your brain is filtering the other part out, even though you know it's there. I mean, our brains really are incredible things. Now, why I'm telling you this is because we rely so much on what we see and all of that so often we're easily fooled when somebody knows what we should be expecting and takes advantage of that. That's the trick of what's called social engineering. Now, there's another very interesting piece to things. We're going to talk about the OODA loop here, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And the more I look at things through my life, the more I see where this kind of plays into daily events, actually. But first we're going to step into the CIA manual of trickery and deception here. Now, this is an interesting one. This is very much the same kind of principle as what I used in the card trick. And the idea here is we want to put something in the other person's drink, okay? And so what they're doing is they're holding up a cigarette in front of them, okay, or a lighter to light their cigarette. Well, what does this do? I don't know about you. I used to smoke. I have since quit smoking. I'm very happy about that. But back when I used to smoke, and if somebody was giving me a light, you better believe my focus is on the little ball of fire that's a few inches from my face. Okay, it's hard not to just focus on that. So what they're doing is they're distracting the person. They're redirecting their focus while doing something else with the other hand. Now, if you're not looking for those other things, you get so tunnel visioned on stuff that you don't notice it. Same sort of thing as that card trick, like I said. Also, using it against us. Let's say I am a spy, right? And I want to be in a place. Let's say I'm going to go to a diner where some people are meeting, right? Am I going to want to look like the guy on the left or the guy on the right? Well, the guy on the left looks alert, energetic, et cetera, et cetera. The guy on the right looks like he's had a really bad day. And if we've had a really bad day, we can kind of understand where we just want to sit there in our peace and quiet and not pay attention to anything and just kind of relax, right? This is what that's going for. The left side could be seen as a threat, but the right side, just our minds generally look at that. We can oftentimes tie it to experiences of our own, and we don't see that person as a threat. So we might be saying things in front of them that we wouldn't say in front of a more alert person. This is, again, our brain doing things and people using it against us. This kind of stuff is definitely usable. So now we're going to talk about the OODA loop. So spies, magicians, pickpockets, con artists, and cyber criminals all use these principles. Now, the OODA loop is a cool thing, right? It's a model for decision making. I love this picture. Being an ex-Navy person, yes, I worked for the Army for 10 years as a contractor, but I was active duty Navy and I worked on aircraft. So I just love this picture. What can I say? Well, the OODA loop is a model for decision making. It was actually designed as a military thing. So John Boyd was the creator of the OODA loop. Okay. And I love the quote about this. It was for air warfare. But he's saying, in order to win, we should operate at a faster tempo or rhythm than our adversaries, or better yet, get inside their OODA loop. Such activity will make us appear ambiguous or unpredictable, thereby generate confusion and disorder among our adversaries. Okay, so this is what's going on is the OODA loop starts with observe, orient, decide, and ends with act. So that's OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. So the OODA loop's a pretty cool thing. It just goes in this circle. Now, the way that this works is a fairly interesting thing. We're going to step through that here. But the ideal situation for a social engineer is to hijack this OODA loop, okay? And they want to get you to make a knee-jerk reaction that bypasses the first three steps and results in the hackers or the attacker's intended action. Okay, so they're going to hijack it, make a knee-jerk reaction that results in their intended reaction. Well, this is what's going on with the OODA loop, okay? You observe, you orient, you decide, and then you act. Well, there's critical thinking steps involved. It's observe, orient, and decide. So here's how it works. Let's say I'm up on stage and I'm doing a talk. I am going to observe the audience, okay? So I see the audience. All right, cool. Then I'm going to orient. That means I'm going to put myself, where am I within the audience? Where am I at in relationship to them? And where do I want to be? Am I good where I'm at? Or, you know what, maybe I need to take, I need to move a couple steps to the left. Somebody's being blocked by by a pole or something. Who knows? But that's the orient piece. Now, decide is where I go, okay, now what am I going to do about this? I need to move to the left. Well, I'm going to take 2 steps and then I act. Okay. Now, once I've taken those steps, then I go back and I'm going to now observe. I'm going to look around and I'm going to orient. I'm going to go, okay, now is this where I wanted to be or do I need to do some more? Now, if I'm where I want to be, the decision is I'm going to stand right here. And that's going to be my action. But maybe I didn't move far enough. You see, we're constantly doing this loop in our head. We're constantly observing what's going on around us. where we fit into what's going on around us, and then we're making decisions based on that. Well, this observe, orient, and decide part, these are critical thinking steps. And the problem with critical thinking is if you've ever been really upset, okay, or really happy even, or angry, right? Think about your ability to make critical thinking decisions during that time. It's extremely hard to do. Our brain is just so pumped full of different chemicals and things like this, right? We've got dopamine going on. We've got all these kinds of things. Sometimes a fight or flight reactions, et cetera, et cetera. Our brains are amazing things, but when we cloud them with stuff like that, it's extremely hard to make a wise choice. Now, where this really starts to come in is the fact that these attackers know this. They are schooled in this psychology. Now, whether they went to a traditional school or whether they've just learned it on the street like a lot of con artists do, they understand what happens with people when they get emotionally charged. And so that's what they focus on a lot. They're going to focus on emotions. When they make you emotionally charged, you are going to probably make bad decisions. You're going to make hasty decisions. So this is why I like to tell people, and this will be part of the defending too, but I might as well throw it out here now. If you get a text message, you get an email, you get some sort of a communication, even a phone call that elicits a really strong emotional response, take a deep breath. You want to be very, very cautious with those. It doesn't mean it's automatically a scam or a phishing attempt or something like that, but it is what they use to get to you. They use it to get you upset. Remember I talked earlier about some of these scams out there, and we look around and we go, how did somebody fall for that? That's just ridiculous. You know, your social security number is about to or has been suspended, right? Who's gonna worry about that? Well, there's a whole demographic out there of elderly people who often are retired on a fixed income. And that social security money is all that they have. That's what they get every month. That's how they pay their bills. It's how they, get food in the house. And now they get this call saying that's been suspended along with all of your benefits. That's a very, very scary thing for those people. And so, of course, they want to fix it right now because, we need to fix it. So they go through and they end up talking to one of the quote unquote operators, which they're very well trained in how to get people to give up sensitive information, to pay money that they may not have, to restore it. Sometimes they'll say that you owe back taxes and that's why it was suspended. There's all these reasons like that they'll get them go down and buy gift cards and such, right? But that's why it works on people like that. And although there's a group of us, a demographic, that it just seems so clear and obvious, when it happens to something that hits you emotionally, it is no longer obvious. Look no further than romance scams as well. If you have family members or know somebody who's been impacted by a romance scam, you can see how strongly these emotions take over just correct thinking. You can point out to people, you know what, this person's picture that they sent you is being used in other places on the internet for other people's, profiles. But they don't care. They're willing to look past it because emotionally they're beyond that. Now, if you've ever dealt with that, you know how difficult that is to deal with. And, it's unfortunate, but this is a prime example of what happens to us when we get emotionally invested in things. And it's why they do what they do. So yeah, let's talk about how they do this by subverting these different components. Well, it's through the social engineering piece. And I love this quote. This quote is from Elliot Alderson, and it's from the show called Mr. Robot, which was a good show. The first 2 seasons were really good. I think it kind of jumped the shark after that. Had Christian Slater in it. It was a good show. It's not one that you want to cuddle up with the kids and watch. It's a little bit raw, but it was extremely popular in the hacker community. And the reason it was so popular is they used real tools, they used real exploits, they used real methods and strategies that real hackers use. Okay, you watch CSI, these CSI shows, the person comes in and they flip up their hoodie and they bang away at the keyboard for about 30 seconds and then they tell you they're through the firewall, right? That just doesn't happen in the real world. What they used in this show a lot was social engineering. And that's where this quote comes from. I love this quote from Elliot Alderson, the main character. I've never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them and watch them, their vulnerabilities are like a neon sign screwed into their heads. That's a pretty strong statement, but it's true. So we as people react certain ways to certain types of stimulus and different approaches. So if somebody gets aggressive with somebody else, there's usually a couple of ways that person is going to react. They're either going to become passive, very likely they're going to become passive and back away from the threat, or they're going to turn around and they're going to become aggressive back at the threat. So these are just a overarching, typical way that humans oftentimes react to things. Now, this is something that the social engineers may try to figure out which way you're going to react to things. I've seen it done. There's actually some competitions out there where they will get in a soundproof booth in front of a lot of people. And these social engineers, they make phone calls and they test companies. And they'll be asking questions. They get points for finding out what kind of information that they can from this person, like things like what operating system they use. I've seen them find out the brand of badges that they use to get in and out of the doors. I mean, stuff like that people are giving away on the phone. But one of the tactics they'll use is they almost get to the point sometimes where they're bullying the person if they're a passive person, and getting them to give up information. Well, first thing they're going to do when they get that person on the phone is try to figure out what are they going to react to. Because you can go with the, I need help. There's something wrong here. Oh my gosh, my spouse is out of the country. They're in the military and I have this problem and so on and so forth. And then, they start taking over, accounts or doing things like that through those kind of helpfulness sides. But on the other side, they can also go into it and start being very angry. Well, sometimes what they'll do is they'll start by being aggressive. And if it turns out that person gets aggressive back, they'll turn around and they'll play the passive role then. They'll go, oh, I'm sorry. It was such a rough day. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to, come across that way. And they may even go to the point that they're really working on the person's ego as this person has been more aggressive, So this is the way that these things work. And it's pretty amazing. And not only happens in person this way, but it also happens electronically, which I think is a very eye-opening thing when we consider what social engineering is. Now, the other thing about social engineering, let me give you another example here. If you live in a place or you work in a place where your building has two front doors, in a lot of places where there's extreme weather, water, snow, whatever, like rain, snow, et cetera, the outside set of doors will be unlocked in the mornings. Okay. So you're coming to work. The outside set of doors is unlocked. You want to get in those doors and get out of the snow, get out of the rain, get out of the cold, whatever it is. So the inside set of doors, though, if they're going to have one of those badge readers on it, it's generally going to be on the inside set of doors. So if I time it so that when you're going for that first door, I show up and open and hold the door for you, most times, people are going to feel like they need to reciprocate. In other words, they feel like they need to do that back for you. It's a social pressure. So if you just show them a badge that looks similar to one that they use, it doesn't even have to be programmed to the system. A lot of times they'll scan their badge and hold open the main door for you. You see, that's how social engineering works. So we oftentimes don't even realize it's being done. So remember, the ideal situation for a social engineer is to hijack that OODA loop, creating that knee-jerk reaction that effectively bypasses the first three steps and results in their action. That's exactly what I was doing there with that example. I'm doing something that hijacks kind of where everything is and gets you to do the action, which is to open the inside door. So here's some examples of some of the stuff that I've seen. And these are some pretty strong examples. We've seen quite a bit of different ways to do this, but this is how they play in the emails for sure. Okay. This happened. There were some school shootings going on, et cetera, and the attacker sent this out. Now imagine, this stuff is hitting the news and this comes out. They don't care. They don't care if they hurt your feelings. This is a real email that actually went out to a campus, and it said security alert reported on campus, emergency scare reported on campus. Kindly go through the memo released and please follow the outline protocol. Well, when people clicked on this, it took them to a fake Microsoft sign-in page that would steal people's credentials. Now, again, this is kind of underhanded, but if you can imagine the fear that somebody may have when these things were already going on. We did see a couple of these small variants, like the IT desk security alert reported, or campus emergency scare, or security concern on campus earlier. These were all these different topics, but they're essentially the same. You see, and they work off people's fear, like, oh my gosh, now it's happened to my school. Okay. Again, they don't care if they hurt your feelings. They want you to take a knee-jerk reaction. In other words, here you're like, whoa, what's this memo? What happened on campus? I need to know. I'm about to go to campus, or, I had friends that were in class today, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all things that can get people emotionally pumped up. Now, there's a type of stuff out there, unlike the last one that had a link in it, or sometimes there'll be documents. There's something called business email compromise. Now, it's known in a lot of places as CEO fraud overseas. It doesn't mean that you're trying to defraud the CEO. What it means is they're using the authority of an executive, such as a CEO, to get people to take action. So they're wiring out money. They're sending gift cards. They're doing a lot of different things, tax forms, other information. They use the authority. Now, the interesting thing about these is there is typically not an infected document attached. There may be no documents attached. There may be no links that they're trying to get you to click on. All these things that we want to learn to look out for and be careful about. These skip all of those, kind of to let people get the guard down. But pure and simple, these scams go after your emotions. Sometimes it's fear. They're also very well done. Unlike in the early days, there is an entire underground economy around phishing and cybercrime. And one of the services that's offered out there is they'll review and update your emails that you want to use for phishing, correct any grammar issues, correct any spelling issues, and they'll actually guarantee an improved click rate based on their services. I mean, that's how serious it's getting out there. So these come in, they don't have anything attached. They just get people to wire money. And a lot of times, again, they're using emotions as the hook here. So this is an example of one that happened years ago. Here, an attempt. And so this is supposed to be from Stu, our CEO here at KnowBe4, to Alana, who was, I believe she was in operations at the time. And it said, I want you to send me a list of the W-2 copies of employees' wage and statement for 2015. Need them in PDF file type. You can send it as an attachment, prepare the list, email them to me ASAP. So what's interesting is if you respond to them, they respond back to you. They're actually waiting for you to do this. And you may go, that seems a little bit odd. Are you sure, you sure this is what you want, or do you really need it? And that they're waiting to respond. Okay. And so we get here, thanks for the quick response. I want you to kindly work with Kim, get the list, and make sure they are in PDF and send it as an attachment. Now, there's send it to me ASAP. There's things here that are red flags. Okay, the urgency piece. The word kindly being used by somebody who is not in a foreign country. It's just not a word that we use often. It doesn't automatically mean things, but it's certainly a red flag. We don't use that word in what we're doing. Now, the goal here is to get them to send all of the W-2s. Now, the attackers then turn around and they file the taxes on behalf of all of these employees. Now, all of these employees happen to get a refund that year, of course, but it goes to the attacker's accounts. So that's the goal here, is to get information that they can do. But you'll see again, there are no links here. There are no attachments. Now, I had it happen in an organization I was at. I was the security and compliance lead, and our HR executive gets an email from the president of the company. Now, the president of the company was out traveling, and the email said, "Hey, I need you to send me a copy of all the W-2s. I'm about to get on a flight, and I'm going to work on them when I'm in the air. Then when I land, I need to send them to the tax person." Now, it wasn't totally unusual for this executive, for this president, to be very in the weeds in things. But something just felt off to the gal. And what she did, she picked up the phone and she just called me and said, I know this is probably nothing, but it just seems weird. So I went over, we looked at the email. The email had his up-to-date signature block, which was changed often. All the information was there, but when we looked at the reply to address, it was not him. All right. So she just had that little, I like to call it the spidey sense, and she acted on it. Now, it was odd because the signature block and stuff was up the same, but what we figured out is we believe that the signature block that they used was from his out of office reply, which told them that he's out of the office, and therefore going to be a little bit easier for somebody to try to trick like this. So they knew he was out of the office, and they had a copy of his current out of office. You can also find out information on people very, very easily through things like LinkedIn. It's called OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence. So you look around, you find out all kinds of things about an organization, including in many cases, most of their org chart. I mean, you could pretty much build an org chart for a lot of organizations right off of LinkedIn. So they know who works for who. They know who the executive assistants are. They know who's in finance for these organizations. And they sure know who the CEO or COO or CFO is, some executive. And they'll use that. So here's another one that's really common, actually. This is going back to having a link. But this is an invoice or a purchase order phish. So we see these come in all the time. In this case, it's kind of interesting. If you look, it comes from message@adpr.com. It's supposed to be from ADP Billing. Well, you can easily spot it if you think about it, but it's kind of tricky there. They kind of smooth that in, hoping you're going to look past it. All right. Now, these are designed just to kind of like flow in with your normal day-to-day stuff, people that deal with invoices all the time. Now, the same email template can be used for multiple things. So what can happen here is, in this case, it was to download a document. So you see there, invoices.adp.com. Now, if you hover that link, that's not really where it's taking you, okay? But they will also sometimes send you to a website and have you log into something, steal your credentials. And if you can imagine, you give up credentials for ADP for an organization, and you're in somewhere that handles some of the finance or the money or some of that stuff in there, that could be disastrous as well. But these are designed not to stand out, not necessarily even to spook you, but to kind of slide into your day-to-day stuff when you're not thinking about it. When your brain is just filtering through stuff. Oh, look, it's an invoice, and it's an invoice, right? So we got to be cautious about those. These actually blend in very well, and they're very, very effective. Now, other ones that we see are package or parcel delivery phishes. This one supposed to be from FedEx at test1@merchminer.com. Okay, if we look at the reply to address, it's very, very obvious. But we see a lot of these shipping ones, and they always end up on some of the top lists of things that end up causing trouble that people fall for. Because, there's always stuff being shipped. I don't know about you. Amazon ones are out there quite a bit too. And if you're anything like me, I buy stuff on Amazon all the time. Sometimes I don't even remember what's coming in from Amazon. It's almost like Christmas. You get a package, you're like, hey, I don't remember ordering this, right? Even though it was only 2 days ago. But we're used to this kind of stuff. But what they'll do sometimes is they'll say the delivery's delayed. And I may not have remembered that I even ordered something, but by golly, I'm mad if my delivery's delayed, right? That's our first reaction to things a lot of times. We're like, oh, come on. And so they'll get us to click on things. They'll get us to go click on a link, and it takes you to Amazon. You got to log in to look at your order. Okay, fine. You're mad because your whatever is going to be delayed. And you put in your username and password, and now they have it as well. These things are all designed to do that kind of thing. Remember, it's to get you a little riled up and push you towards their intended reaction. These shipping ones work great. Pending delivery, delivery rescheduled, failed delivery, we tried to reach you. All of those work really, really well and are very common out there. Now, another thing you'll see that has a little psychological side to it is ads like this. It's called clickbait. But you see these ads on, even mainstream news sites and such. And the way it works, it's called pattern interruption, right? It leverages pattern interruption to create curiosity, often based on what's called the information gap theory. And there's the Carnegie Mellon explanation for that. But basically what they do is they get you interested in something, but then they deny you the answer to something. So you want to go click on it. Human nature. Especially in these days where we're very much used to having answers on the tips of our fingers, if you will, on our smartphones, right? We immediately know what's going on. It drives us a little bit crazier these days to not know what's going on. So these can be very, very effective. And there are things like, you won't believe what they caught the supermarket, the cashier's doing at the supermarket. Watch closely, okay? So these things aren't even related. Right? When you end up clicking on them and look at it, you have no idea. They just circled a spot and put an arrow somewhere. It has nothing to do with what's going on. We have seen this type of thing weaponized, though. So they take people to an infected website and spread malware through that. The 5 things you need to know about clickbait, number 4 will blow your mind. I love that because that's a clickbait ad about clickbait, which is just perfect. Now, we also have to understand some of these will leverage outrage and anger, which we're seeing more often just in social media. We're seeing outrage and anger a lot. Now, outrage and anger are some of the strongest emotions we can have to get us to take action. So if I put an ad out there that says, so-and-so was caught doing this, let's say a politician, right? So-and-so was caught red-handed doing this. We can't stand for this anymore. Click here to go sign this petition. If you're upset enough about whatever the topic is that I made up, you're sure going to want to go, sign this petition to have them arrested or thrown out of the country or whatever it ends up being, right? But you're going to be much more likely to go do that. And then when they ask you things like, hey, we need your name and your social security number to validate that you're a voter. If you're sufficiently upset, you may put that information in there. You see, they can do that by getting you upset. And so outrage and anger are the 2 strongest emotions that cause us to take action. They tend to be easy to do as well. So how do we defend against all this fun, right? I hope that you've seen that psychology is much, much deeper than you may think. It goes way deeper than just a simple Nigerian prince scam. But what we have to do, first of all, is we have to understand what distracts us, what kinds of things get us riled up, right? And I'm not talking about necessarily sitting down in front of a mirror and doing a huge self-examination, right? But if you get easily riled up by something that's, maybe an unjust thing, like unfair things, well, that's a pretty big deal, right? You should be aware of that. And then when something comes up and you get that email that says, I can't believe this is going on, so-and-so said this, you may realize that, hey, you know what? This may get to me. I need to be careful with this thing. So putting a spotlight on those things is very important. And the emotions they typically use are these. It's greed, like the Nigerian prince scam, anything that you can get money for nothing. Curiosity, like I said with that clickbait stuff, that's a very, very strong one for people these days. Self-interest, things that benefit you. Those are also very useful in manipulating people. Okay, things about you. Now, urgency is going to be in almost every one of them. I don't think I've ever seen a phishing email or even a smishing, which is the text message ones, or the vishing, the voice ones, that didn't have a sense of urgency. Like, I've never seen a phishing email that said, hey, I'd like you to wire me $150,000 whenever you get around to it. Take your time. Don't care. No big deal. Just send it whenever. No, they don't work that way. They say there's something urgent going on. I need it to happen right now. I asked you to do it earlier, and so they leverage fear in on top of it. I can't believe you messed that up. You need to send me this money now. That kind of stuff happens, but the urgency drives people into it. Otherwise, you can kind of go, wait a minute, you know what? When you're on your lunch break, you go, that seems a little weird to me. No, they're going to work with urgency and the fear. Now, fear may be fear of losing your job, but it may also be fear of not knowing something, or FOMO, fear of missing out. That's also very strong, especially in certain demographics, that people don't want to be the only ones that don't know something. So they'll leverage that too. And then, of course, helpfulness. Every time we see a major disaster, whether it's a man-made disaster or a natural one, there's all kinds of fake charities and fundraisers and stuff like that are out there. They will use that to scam you out of money. So again, I'm going to say this. If you have a strong emotional reaction to a text message, a phone call, or an email, take a deep breath. Look at it. Look for some of these lures that they're going to throw in there and go, oh, you know what? They're trying to get me with a little urgency here. But take that deep breath, take a step back, and then look at things. And what I like is we have this red flags document here. It's a PDF document we can get to you. It's a fantastic document that when you're in that state of heightened emotions, you can step back and you can look at this and go, you know what? I would have forgotten to hover the link. Or, what do I do now? Oh, yeah, I need to look at the reply to address and see where that goes to. This is a fantastic thing to print out and keep in your cubicles. I know before in the office, a lot of people have these printed and put on their cubicles as a reminder. I mean, it's just such a great little document. I can't share this enough with people. But we do need to plan a little bit. We need to be intentional about this, okay? If we're going to train people, we can't have it be accidental and just assume it's going to work. So what we want to do is we want to kind of make this into something consistent. It used to be people would put someone in a room once a year, throw a bunch of slides up, call it good. Now we can all look at that and go, that's not going to change a security culture in an organization. It's not even going to change behavior, at least not for long at all. So these 4 steps is what we've found works. And first of all, get a baseline. If you don't have a baseline already, we can get you a baseline. It's free. There's no obligation. What that is basically we can send a bunch of phishing emails to some of your users and let's see where you are. Let's get some real numbers. And what I find is people are oftentimes very surprised. They think, oh, I'll never be in that 30% range. And then they're shocked by the fact that they are. Now, the next step, though, is to train them. So we not only want to teach them about phishing and social engineering, though, we need to go a little deeper on things like password hygiene and overall security hygiene. We want to fix a lot of the things that people do wrong. Password reuse and using simple passwords. Those are all huge issues out there. But we want to teach them these things. And then you do the simulated phishing. Now, the simulated phishing isn't designed to trick people, to mess them up, to make them look or feel bad. That is never the idea behind simulated phishing. The idea is kind of to take what you learned in training and, much like the lab portion of a course, get to practice it with some hands-on. And once you can do that, once you can practice it with a little hands-on stuff, that makes a big difference on how they retain things. Now, the other thing you want to do is you want to do it on a regular basis. So don't necessarily do it once a year, like I said, but maybe quarterly or even monthly if you can. give a 5 or a 15-minute training session on something that's relevant, right? Tax times in the first part of the year, holiday scams, whatever it is that may be going on. Send them some relevant things that they should care about, but do it more often in smaller chunks. And then you want to do the phishing at least once a month. And then last but not least, look at the results. I see a lot of people not looking at results, and that leaves a lot of data on the table, leaves a lot of the ability to tackle this undone. And what I mean by that is, if your organization never, ever opens a document and enables active content on simulated attacks, don't continue to spend your training time, your limited amount of training time, teaching them about that. Work on the things that they do more often, not the things that they don't. So there's a lot of data that can be gleaned from the results of this. But if you do these 4 things, it's actually very simple. It takes a little bit of planning, but honestly, this doesn't take that much effort, and the rewards for this are huge. So think about that. I hope you've learned a few things today. It's been my pleasure here teaching you this. I hope you understand that what we're facing is not as simple as, like I said, the kids in the basement drinking Mountain Dew, eating pizza. It's just not that simple. There is a lot of money on the line these days, and these folks are using very, very advanced techniques. So if you want to reach out to me, you want to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter, feel free to connect to me here. I do a weekly podcast every Friday morning, and we're doing a monthly one as well through KnowBe4 called Security Masterminds, where we interview other security leaders that are out there. And I love that podcast. But feel free to reach out to me, connect to me, ask me questions, give me comments, let me know what you think. I'd be happy to chat with you anytime. So thank you very much and have a great day.